Welcome to Spicy Family Scandals, where real-life drama meets hard-earned wisdom. Today's story is about betrayal, resilience, and the power of standing up for yourself. Let's dive in.
I never thought my life could shatter so completely in just one moment. It happened in our kitchen, of all places. A room that used to be filled with laughter and the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings. I was holding a medical bill in one hand, and my phone in the other. The hospital's number still on the screen. Our 3-year-old daughter, Lily, was upstairs napping, her tiny body exhausted from another round of chemotherapy. The doctors had been clear. We needed $60,000 for a new treatment that might save her life. And we needed it now. I turned to Mark, my husband of 8 years, the man who had promised me in sickness and in health. He was scrolling through his phone, his face as calm as if we were discussing what to have for dinner. "Mark," I began, my voice already cracking. "I know this is overwhelming, but if we dip into the savings and maybe sell the cabin." He cut me off, his tone sharper than I'd ever heard before. "No." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. "What do you mean now?" "Mark, this is Lily we're talking about. Our daughter." He looked up finally, but the expression in his eyes chilled me to my core. "I don't have room for sick people in my life, Anna. You know how I feel about this kind of thing. I can't." He paused, his lips curling into a sneer. "Deal with it. It's not what I signed up for." I froze, the words hitting me like a physical blow. You can't deal with it? Mark, she's 3 years old. She's your child." He shrugged, as if I were accusing him of something trivial, like forgetting to take out the trash. "I've made my decision. You and Lily need to go. I can't handle this anymore." The air left my lungs. "You're throwing us out?" I asked, barely able to speak through the lump in my throat. "Anna, don't make this more dramatic than it needs to be. You've got family, don't you? Go stay with them. This is just too much for me." The sound of a car pulling into the driveway cut through my disbelief. I turned toward the window and saw her. Jessica, the woman I'd suspected but never confronted. She stepped out of her car, carrying an overnight bag, her expression smug and self-assured as she strutted toward the front door. "You've got to be kidding me," I whispered, turning back to Mark. "You're moving her in? Now, while your daughter is fighting for her life?" He didn't even flinch. "Jessica makes me happy, Anna. And right now, I need that more than anything." I felt my knees give way, but I gripped the counter for support. The man I had loved for nearly a decade, the father of my child, was throwing us away like garbage. But as the walls of my life crumbled around me, something in my chest ignited. A spark of anger, determination, or maybe desperation. I wasn't leaving without a fight. And I had one thing on my side that Mark seemed to have forgotten. I knew all his passwords. That night, as Lily slept beside me on the couch at my sister's house, I logged into Mark's email, his bank accounts, and even his social media. What I found wasn't just incriminating, it was a goldmine. And the next morning, when he woke up, he had no idea what was coming. The morning light spilled through the blinds as I sat in my sister Jenna's tiny living room. Lily still fast asleep under her favorite pink blanket on the couch. I hadn't slept a wink. My hands trembled as I scrolled through Mark's emails, each one unraveling more of the web of lies he had spun around me. There it was, confirmation of the affair. Reservations for luxury getaways I'd never heard about. Dinners at high-end restaurants we couldn't afford. And even a jewelry purchase. An engraved bracelet for Jessica that read, "To my forever." My heart clenched. But it was the financial records that truly made my blood run cold. Over the past year, Mark had been siphoning money from our joint savings account into a separate one. His texts to Jessica made it clear. He was planning to divorce me and start a new life with her. But what sent me over the edge was the email exchange with a real estate agent. Mark was actively in the process of selling our family home, without my knowledge. The house I had poured my heart into, where Lily had taken her first steps, was about to go on the market. The sale was scheduled for Friday, just 3 days away. I sat there staring at the screen, my mind racing. Mark wasn't just abandoning us, he was erasing us. But what he didn't realize was that I wasn't the woman he thought he could push around anymore. Jenna walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. She took one look at my face and set them down. "What did you find?" I handed her the laptop, and watched her expression shift from confusion to fury. "That absolute piece of trash," she hissed. "He's selling the house. And this Jessica was in on it." I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. "I have to stop him. But I can't afford a lawyer right now. And with Lily's medical bills." My voice trailed off as the weight of everything pressed down on me. Jenna's eyes lit up with a mischievous spark. Who said anything about lawyers? You've got all the power right here, she said, tapping the laptop. Mark wanted to play dirty. Let's show him what that feels like. A plan began to form. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was survival. For Lily and for me. First, I transferred every penny from Mark's secret account back into our joint savings, leaving just enough to cover a single fast food meal. Then, I canceled the pending real estate transaction, flagging it as fraudulent since my signature wasn't on any of the paperwork. That alone would tie things up for weeks. But it wasn't enough. I needed to hit Mark where it hurt. Scrolling through his inbox, I noticed emails from his boss. They weren't work-related. They were very personal and incriminating. Mark had been embezzling from his company, rerouting small amounts of money over the years into private accounts. The kind of crime that, when uncovered, could ruin him. Anna, Jenna said cautiously, reading over my shoulder. Are you sure about this? You could just walk away, take Lily and start fresh. I shook my head. He threw us away like we were nothing, Jenna. He would have let Lily die, just to keep his perfect little life intact. No, he doesn't get to walk away from this unscathed. I composed an anonymous email with all the evidence attached, and sent it directly to his company's ethics department. And then for the final blow, I sent Jessica a simple message, from Mark's account. Jessica, I've been thinking. Maybe this isn't what I want after all. Let's take a break. By the time Mark woke up in his perfectly curated little life, it was already crumbling beneath his feet. And he had no idea who had lit the match. The next morning, I barely recognized my own reflection in the mirror. My eyes were hollow, rimmed with exhaustion, but there was a fire behind them I hadn't seen in years. I'd spent the night quietly packing essentials for Lily and me. Things Mark hadn't even noticed were gone yet. He was still under the impression he held all the cards. That illusion wouldn't last long. I waited until 9 a.m., when I knew he'd be in the middle of his team's morning meeting, before making my first move. I called his office. Hello, this is Anna, Mark's wife. I just wanted to confirm that he's available for the company audit review today, I said, my voice calm and steady. There was a pause on the other end. I'm sorry, I don't know about an audit, his assistant replied. Oh, I said innocently, that's strange. I thought he'd be preparing since I heard him discussing discrepancies in the company's accounts last night. I hung up before she could ask more questions, knowing that would plant just enough doubt for the office to start digging into his records. Step 1 done. Next, I turned my attention to Jessica. Using Mark's email, I sent another message to her. Meet me at the house at 6 p.m. We need to talk about everything. It was vague, but loaded enough to keep her guessing. By 5:30 p.m., I was already back at our house. The sight of it made my chest ache. Lily's swing set in the backyard, the garden I'd planted bursting with blooms. This was supposed to be our safe haven, but it had turned into a battlefield. I let myself in with my key, noticing with some satisfaction that Mark hadn't changed the locks yet. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the car pull up. It was Jessica, just as expected. She strutted in, dressed to the nines, her confidence almost laughable. Mark? She called, freezing when she saw me. What are you doing here? Waiting, I said simply, gesturing to the chair across from me. Have a seat. She didn't move. Where's Mark? Not here. But he will be soon, I'm sure, I replied with a sly smile. Jessica narrowed her eyes but sat down reluctantly. What do you want, Anna? I leaned forward, my voice low and firm. I want you to know exactly what kind of man you're dealing with. Because trust me, if he can betray me and his own daughter, you're not safe either. Her confidence wavered for a split second before she scoffed. You're just bitter because he chose me. I almost laughed. Chose you? Sweetheart, he chose himself. But don't take my word for it. I pulled out printed copies of Mark's financial records, emails, and even the text threads where he was already scouting younger replacements for her. Her face turned pale as she scanned the papers. You're lying, she snapped, but there was no conviction in her voice. Am I? Go ahead, call him. Ask him why he's been emailing other women while you've been playing house with him. Her hand hovered over her phone, trembling. Before she could decide, the front door opened. Mark walked in, stopping dead in his tracks when he saw us. What the Anna? What are you doing here? His eyes darted to Jessica, then back to me. The color drained from his face. He knew he was caught, but he still tried to bluff. You need to leave. Now. Not so fast, I said, holding up the documents. We're just having a little chat about your extracurricular activities. Care to explain this? I tossed the papers onto the coffee table. Mark's face contorted with rage. You had no right to go through my stuff. And you had no right to steal from our family or abandon your sick daughter. I shot back, my voice rising. You think you're untouchable, Mark? Guess what? I'm done playing by your rules. Jessica stood abruptly, throwing the papers at him. You've been cheating on me too? You're disgusting. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Mark turned to me, his mask of arrogance slipping. Anna, let's talk about this. No, Mark. You don't get to talk anymore. You're going to get exactly what you deserve, I said, my voice steady. As I walked out the door, I left him standing there in the ruins of his own making. The storm I had unleashed was far from over, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. The next day, the chaos I had set in motion began to ripple outward. Mark was drowning, and I could see it even from a distance. Jenna texted me a screenshot of a breaking news alert. Local business exec under investigation for financial misconduct. The article didn't name Mark outright, but it was only a matter of time. I imagined him sitting at his desk, sweating bullets as his colleagues whispered, and the walls of his fake empire started to crumble. But the real surprise came when I got a call from a blocked number that afternoon. I answered cautiously. Hello. You think you're clever, don't you? It was Mark, his voice a mix of anger and desperation. You think you can just ruin me and walk away? Ruin you? I asked, feigning innocence. Mark, you did that all by yourself. Don't play games with me, Anna, he snarled. You've made a mistake. You think you can humiliate me, and I won't fight back? I'm not going down without a fight. I smirked, even though my heart was racing. Oh, I'm counting on it, Mark. Because the more you fight, the deeper you dig your own grave. He hung up, but his threat lingered in the air. I knew Mark wouldn't just roll over and let me win. He'd strike back, and I needed to be ready. That evening, I went back to the house one last time to retrieve the few items I'd left behind. The place felt cold and hollow, like all the life and love it once held had been drained away. I was gathering the last of Lily's toys when I noticed a file folder peeking out from under Mark's desk. Curious, I opened it. Inside were pages of printed emails and handwritten notes, plans for offshore accounts, lists of contacts, and what looked like coded messages. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just embezzlement, it was something bigger. Something illegal enough to land him in prison for a long time. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped me back to reality. I peeked through the curtains and saw Mark storming up the walkway, his face twisted in rage. I grabbed the file and slipped out the back door, heart pounding as I sprinted to my car. By the time I got to Jenna's house, my mind was racing. I laid the documents out on her dining table, each piece fitting together like a jigsaw puzzle. Mark wasn't just stealing from his company. He was laundering money through shell corporations. And Jessica wasn't just his mistress. She was his partner in crime. Jenna, this is huge, I whispered, my voice trembling. If this gets out, he won't just lose his job. He'll lose everything. Anna, Jenna said, her voice steady, you need to be careful. If Mark realizes you have this. I know, I interrupted, my jaw tightening. That's why I'm not going to give him the chance. The next day I made an appointment with a lawyer. I handed over everything, emails, financial records, and now the documents from the house. She listened intently, her eyes widening as I laid out the full scope of Mark's deceit. This is more than enough to take him down, she said. But you need to be prepared. Men like your husband don't go down quietly. I'm not afraid of him, I said, though my hands were trembling. I'm doing this for Lily. She deserves better than a father who would rather walk away than fight for her. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she smiled up at me, her little face pale but full of trust. Mommy, are we going to be okay? I kissed her forehead, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine. But deep down, I knew the storm was far from over. Mark had made his move, and now it was my turn to play the final card. The following morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. When I picked it up, I was greeted by a flood of texts from unknown numbers. The messages ranged from thinly veiled threats to outright accusations, and it didn't take long to figure out who was behind them. Mark had gone on the offensive. Anna, Jenna called from the kitchen, her tone uneasy. You need to see this. I rushed in to find her laptop open on the counter, displaying a social media post from Mark. He had written a long dramatic diatribe accusing me of being a vindictive ex-wife, who was fabricating lies to punish him for moving on. His version of the story painted me as the unstable one, while he claimed to be the victim of my supposed manipulation. But the comments beneath the post were what truly shocked me. Friends, co-workers, and even some family members had weighed in, offering their support to Mark and questioning my actions. A few outright called me a liar. Unbelievable. I muttered, scrolling through the comments. He's trying to turn everyone against me. Jenna frowned. People like Mark thrive on appearances. But you have the truth on your side, Anna. Just stick to the plan. Still, the post had done its damage. I spent most of the day fielding calls and messages, trying to explain the situation to people who didn't want to hear the truth. Even my parents, who had always been supportive, seemed hesitant. Anna, my mother said during one particularly painful call, are you sure you're not letting your emotions cloud your judgment? Mark's always been a good provider. Maybe this is just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. The words echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a betrayal on every level. By mid-afternoon, I decided to go dark. I turned off my phone, logged out of social media, and focused on what mattered. The evidence I had handed over to my lawyer. I couldn't afford to let Mark's smear campaign distract me. But just when I thought I'd regained a sliver of control, the situation took another unexpected turn. That evening, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You're not alone." Curious, I opened it, and my heart skipped a beat. The email was from one of Mark's former colleagues, a woman named Vanessa, who had left his company under mysterious circumstances a year earlier. Her message was brief but packed with implications. Anna, I saw Mark's post. Don't believe the lies. I've been where you are, and I know exactly what he's capable of. If you want the truth about why I left the company, meet me tomorrow at 3 p.m. at the cafe on Pine Street. Don't tell anyone. Vanessa. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Who was Vanessa and what did she know? Could this be the missing piece I needed to take Mark down for good? Or was it some kind of trap? Jenna leaned over my shoulder, reading the email. Do you trust her? I don't know, I admitted. But if she has information about Mark, I can't ignore it. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my nerves on edge. Vanessa was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee. She looked younger than I expected, but there was a weariness in her eyes that suggested she'd been through her share of battles. You're Anna, she said, her voice low as I slid into the seat across from her. I've been waiting for someone like you to come along. What do you mean? I asked cautiously. Vanessa leaned in, her expression grave. Mark didn't just embezzle from the company. He blackmailed me into keeping quiet about it. When I refused to play along, he ruined my career. I have proof, but I've been too scared to use it. She pulled out a flash drive and pushed it across the table. This has everything you need. Financial records, emails, even recordings of conversations. But be careful, Anna. Mark isn't just ruthless, he's dangerous. As I gripped the flash drive, a chill ran down my spine. For the first time, I realized just how deep Mark's deceit went, and how far he might go to protect his secrets. As I drove home with the flash drive tucked securely in my bag, my mind was spinning. Vanessa's revelations confirmed what I had suspected. Mark wasn't just selfish, he was calculating, ruthless, and willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. And now I had the proof to expose him. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every car that appeared in my rearview mirror felt like a threat. Every glance from a stranger like a warning. Vanessa's words echoed in my mind. Mark isn't just ruthless, he's dangerous. When I got back to Jenna's house, I locked the doors and went straight to her laptop. Jenna, I called, my voice trembling. We need to see what's on this. She appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned but determined. Let's do it. The flash drive contained a treasure trove of evidence. Spreadsheets tracking Mark's illicit transactions, email chains discussing offshore accounts, and most damning of all, a series of audio recordings. In one, Mark could be heard threatening Vanessa, his voice cold and devoid of remorse. You say one word, and I'll make sure you never work in this town again, he growled. You think anyone's going to believe you over me? I have friends in high places, Vanessa. Don't forget that. Jenna and I exchanged a look. This was bigger than I had imagined. The level of corruption, the calculated manipulation, it painted a picture of a man who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. This could bury him, Jenna said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Anna, you need to be careful. If Mark finds out you have this. I nodded, my throat tight. I know, but if I don't do something, he'll keep getting away with it. And Lily deserves better than to grow up under his shadow. The next step was clear. I needed to get this evidence to the authorities. But before I could act, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number again. Against my better judgment, I answered. Anna, Mark's voice hissed on the other end, sending a chill down my spine. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're making a big mistake. Funny, I shot back, my voice steady despite the fear twisting in my gut. I could say the same to you. There was a pause, then a low, humorless laugh. You think you've won? You don't know who you're dealing with. Walk away now, and maybe I'll be generous enough to let you keep what little life you have left. Generous? I snapped. You left your own daughter to die, Mark. You don't get to talk about generosity. His voice turned cold. This is your last warning, Anna. Drop whatever you're planning, or you'll regret it. He hung up before I could respond, but his threat hung in the air like a storm cloud. I stared at the phone, my hands trembling. Anna? Jenna asked, her voice soft. What did he say? I swallowed hard, then stood up. He's scared, I said, more to convince myself than her. And that means I'm doing something right. That night, I sent the flash drive's contents to both my lawyer and an investigative journalist Vanessa had recommended. I knew it was risky, but the world needed to see Mark for what he truly was. But as I lay in bed, watching Lily sleep peacefully beside me, a terrible thought crept into my mind. Mark was dangerous and he was desperate. If he couldn't silence me through intimidation, what else might he try? I didn't have an answer, but one thing was clear. The final showdown was coming and I needed to be ready. The day of reckoning arrived faster than I expected. By noon, my lawyer called to confirm that the evidence had been handed over to both law enforcement and Mark's company. The journalist Vanessa suggested had already published a detailed exposé, tying Mark to fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The article was gaining traction, and public opinion was shifting rapidly. But I knew Mark wouldn't go down without a fight. That evening, as I was preparing dinner at Jenna's house, a loud knock echoed through the front door. My heart leapt into my throat. Jenna appeared from the hallway, her face pale. Do you think it's him? She whispered. I nodded, gripping the nearest object, a cast-iron skillet, as I approached the door. When I peeked through the peephole, I was stunned to see not Mark, but two uniformed police officers standing there. I opened the door cautiously. Can I help you? Anna Williams, one of them asked. We're here to let you know that Mark Williams has been taken into custody. We have reason to believe he may have intended to harm you or your child. My knees nearly gave out. Harm us? I stammered. The officer nodded grimly. When he was arrested, he had a loaded weapon in his car, along with printed copies of your address and your sister's. We believe he was desperate and planning something dangerous. The relief that washed over me was immediate but fleeting. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and gratitude all at once. Mark's downfall had been inevitable, but to know he had planned to hurt us, it made me realize how close we had come to losing everything. The officers assured me that he would remain in custody while charges were brought against him, and they promised to keep me updated. As they left, Jenna wrapped her arms around me, and for the first time in weeks I let myself cry. Not tears of fear or anger, but tears of release. It was finally over. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Mark's arrest made headlines, and the flood of support I received was overwhelming. People who had doubted me before came forward to apologize, including my parents. Even strangers sent messages of encouragement, sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival. The house, once a symbol of my pain, was sold. The proceeds went toward Lily's medical bills and securing a stable future for the two of us. Her new treatment began soon after, and within weeks, her energy started to return. For the first time in months, I saw her smile, a real radiant smile, and I knew I had made the right choices. As for me, I found a quiet strength I didn't know I had. Mark's betrayal had shattered me, but it also forced me to rebuild. And in doing so, I discovered that I was stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I had ever imagined. The lesson I took away from it all was simple but profound. Sometimes the people who promise to love and protect us are the ones who hurt us the most. But their betrayal doesn't define us, our response does. It's in the moments of greatest adversity that we find out who we truly are. Life isn't perfect now, but it's honest. Lily and I have a small apartment filled with laughter, hope, and love. I've started working with an organization that helps women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. It feels like a fitting way to turn my pain into purpose. And every night as I watch Lily drift off to sleep, I remind myself of this. We don't always get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to choose how we rise from it. And rise we will. The day of reckoning arrived faster than I expected. By noon, my lawyer called to confirm that the evidence had been handed over to both law enforcement and Mark's company. The journalist Vanessa suggested had already published a detailed exposé, tying Mark to fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The article was gaining traction, and public opinion was shifting rapidly. But I knew Mark wouldn't go down without a fight. That evening, as I was preparing dinner at Jenna's house, a loud knock echoed through the front door. My heart leapt into my throat. Jenna appeared from the hallway, her face pale. Do you think it's him? She whispered. I nodded, gripping the nearest object, a cast-iron skillet, as I approached the door. When I peeked through the peephole, I was stunned to see not Mark, but two uniformed police officers standing there. I opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" "Anna Williams," one of them asked. "We're here to let you know that Mark Williams has been taken into custody. We have reason to believe he may have intended to harm you or your child." My knees nearly gave out. "Harm us?" I stammered. The officer nodded grimly. "When he was arrested, he had a loaded weapon in his car, along with printed copies of your address and your sister's. We believe he was desperate and planning something dangerous." The relief that washed over me was immediate but fleeting. I felt a mix of anger, fear, and gratitude all at once. Mark's downfall had been inevitable, but to know he had planned to hurt us, it made me realize how close we had come to losing everything. The officers assured me that he would remain in custody while charges were brought against him, and they promised to keep me updated. As they left, Jenna wrapped her arms around me, and for the first time in weeks I let myself cry. Not tears of fear or anger, but tears of release. It was finally over. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Mark's arrest made headlines, and the flood of support I received was overwhelming. People who had doubted me before came forward to apologize, including my parents. Even strangers sent messages of encouragement, sharing their own stories of betrayal and survival. The house, once a symbol of my pain, was sold. The proceeds went toward Lily's medical bills and securing a stable future for the two of us. Her new treatment began soon after, and within weeks, her energy started to return. For the first time in months, I saw her smile, a real radiant smile, and I knew I had made the right choices. As for me, I found a quiet strength I didn't know I had. Mark's betrayal had shattered me, but it also forced me to rebuild. And in doing so, I discovered that I was stronger, smarter, and more resilient than I had ever imagined. The lesson I took away from it all was simple but profound. Sometimes the people who promise to love and protect us are the ones who hurt us the most. But their betrayal doesn't define us, our response does. It's in the moments of greatest adversity that we find out who we truly are. Life isn't perfect now, but it's honest. Lily and I have a small apartment filled with laughter, hope, and love. I've started working with an organization that helps women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. It feels like a fitting way to turn my pain into purpose. And every night as I watch Lily drift off to sleep, I remind myself of this. We don't always get to choose what happens to us, but we do get to choose how we rise from it. And rise we will.